Good evening, an unscheduled live stream from Mythical Ireland this evening. I've just finished watching a very powerful documentary on the Irish language TV station TG4. You may have seen several posts about it this evening, including some pictures that I shared as it was being broadcast. An absolutely thoroughly fascinating programme, a fascinating investigation of the origins of the Irish people and the prehistory of the island. So while the programme was ongoing, I was feverishly scribbling notes. I mean, having thoroughly digested the paper about this that was released in June in Nature magazine, I knew a fair amount of what was going to be covered in this programme, but it's still massively impressive. The presenter, Moncon McGann, is, he's a wonderful guide. He was a wonderful guide to the whole subject matter. So let me just very quickly summarise what was said as best I possibly can, just to give you some insights. In the past decade, and actually probably in the past 7 years, perhaps maximum, what we thought we knew about our ancient origins in Ireland has been completely thrown out. So before we began to sequence genomes from skeletal remains found in Irish burial sites dating from the Mesolithic, that's the hunter-gatherer period from about 10,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago, from the Neolithic, which is about from 6,000 years ago to about 4,500 years ago, and from the later Bronze Age. Before all of that, what we thought we knew was that the Irish were descended from the first hunter-gatherers who had, arrived here sometime around 9,000 or 10,000 years ago. Now, the oldest site in Ireland, in terms of human settlement, and this is post-Ice Age, of course, is at Mount Sandel in the very north of the island, near Coleraine. So there was an investigation of that. There was an investigation of Rathlin Island, which was very important to the story. There was an investigation of the remains found at Poolnabrone, the dolmen, the famous dolmen in the Burren in County Clare. There was an investigation, of course. The central feature of the documentary was the revelation about the bones at Newgrange, well, as a result of all of this science that's been going on behind the scenes, we now know that the old model is completely redundant. In fact, there were three sort of distinct and separate arrivals. The first of which was the aforementioned Mesolithic or Middle Stone Age, the hunter-gatherer arrival sometime around 10,000 years ago. Around 6,000 years ago, so approximately 4,000 BC, we had the arrival of farming. And the people who brought farming were a different people to the Mesolithic. One of the things that was said was that the sheer numbers of Neolithic arrivals diluted the Mesolithic population so that their DNA has gone beyond detection in the modern Irish population. But even more incredible is the fact that, we often refer to the great monuments of the Boyne Valley, Brú-na-Bóinne at Newgrange, which I was delighted to hear Moncon McGann refer to in its old Irish name. He was calling it Sheon Bhrú, the modern Irish version of Sheed Broga, the old Irish. What was I saying? I have to collect my thoughts because there's so much to talk about. That those people, we refer to those as our ancestors. People go to megalithic tombs and sacred sites around Ireland, and we talk about ancestors. The reality is, and this is the information that has been gleaned in the past 5 or 6 years, that most of the modern Irish population is in fact descended from a later arrival still, that is post-Neolithic. So the Neolithic people saw, certainly the DNA of the Neolithic was mostly wiped out, and what we see is 2300 BC that there's a distinct threshold. After that, we have the early Bronze Age people, and they're the ones that we are most closely related to in terms of DNA. So the people who built Newgrange, much as we would like to consider them as ancestors, and much as that's the way we talk about them, in fact, they were a distinct people. So I'll just quickly go through my notes and just try and recollect it. I mean, it's only just, the program has only ended about 10 minutes ago. I'm trying to collect my thoughts and just do a live stream while some of this stuff is still in my head. I'd love to see this program again, and hopefully I will see it again repeatedly, because it's got so much wonderful information. Mount Sandel is very interesting because in fact there was a medieval fort on the site. And that might have sort of told a lie, as it were, or created a false perception as to what it was. But in fact, the oldest evidence, the earliest evidence of human settlement on the island of Ireland, currently, there is a bear bone that was retrieved from a cave. Was that in Sligo? Dr. Marion Dowd of Sligo IT. I have a post about that on the Mythical Ireland blog. Indicates evidence of cutting by humans, and that maybe predates this. But the earliest evidence is Mount Sandel. The midden, or the rubbish site there, showed that the diet was mainly fish, fowl and shellfish. One of the things that was discussed in the paper by Dr. Lara Cassidy and her colleagues, the paper in Nature, and you can download that paper from the internet, I'll link to that afterwards. One of the things they found in relation to the Mesolithic population, that was the Mesolithic population of Ireland was quite insular. It did not seem to have much contact with the Mesolithic populations of Europe at the time. There were 2 genomes sequenced from the Mesolithic, and one of the things that was found, this is absolutely fascinating, was that the people of the hunter-gatherer era, this is the pre-Newgrange era, they had dark skin and blue eyes, which apparently is a unique combination that doesn't exist in the human population anymore. Now, I'm not sure if the programme specified whether that just doesn't exist in Ireland or whether it doesn't exist anywhere, but that's what I scribbled down. Dark skin and blue eyes, a unique combination that doesn't exist anymore. And that, as I said already, the sheer numbers of arrivers in the Neolithic diluted the Mesolithic population beyond detection. Pulnabron is interesting because it's from Irish Pulnamrone, which means the place of sorrows. 36 individuals were buried there, or interred within the chamber, if you want to call it. Dr. Anne Lynch was the excavator there. The bones were all disarticulated. The 36 individuals represented men, women and children. And there was evidence of trauma, including in one case an arrow in a bone. So we tend to think of the Neolithic as a peaceful age. We see these giant monuments and we think, well, these are people who had to have worked closely together to achieve these things. Not necessarily so. There might have been stuff going on that we didn't really know about. And of course, the big find from Pulnabron was this infant who, it had been shown, was likely to have suffered from Down's syndrome. Balinahati was mentioned. That's the Giant's Ring outside Belfast. And Balinahati woman was found in 1855 in a farmer apparently encountered a subterranean tomb in a circular chamber about 2 meters in diameter, and this had several compartments in it, in one of those compartments they found the remains of this woman. She was apparently aged somewhere between 18 and 35 years when she died. It's very interesting seeing how the specialists, the osteoarchaeologists, etc., are able to identify the characteristics from a skull. Is this a female? Yes. Apparently a straight forehead, a smaller skull than a man, and something to do with the thickness of the bone and the attachment of muscles that differs between male and female skeletons. Well, her ancestry was from the Mediterranean, from the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. And it's believed that the people who arrived in Ireland in the Neolithic headed across the Alps from the Middle East, that they arrived in Spain and France around 4500 BC, and that later they came to Ireland sometime around 4000 BC or so. And fascinating. I loved the fact that Moncon McGann went to the Royal Irish Academy to have a look at some of the old manuscripts. He had a look at the Yellow Book of Lecan, was it? No, which is the one that was composed in Sligo. Is it the Yellow Book of Lecan? I didn't write it down. But they were looking at Laura Gowalla, and he was fascinated by the fact that Laura Gowalla, in fact, says that the Irish originated in the Middle East. Wasn't really weighing down on either side of the argument as to whether, you know, the mythology confirms what the science is finding. But you know my views on all of that. The Neolithic Irish looked more like Southern Europeans, particularly, I think we knew this anyway, particularly the people of Sardinia. Dark hair, brown eyes, and sallow skin. So again, different genetic makeup. The Newgrange find was fascinating because Dr. Cassidy and her colleagues were looking for something from Newgrange that they could extract DNA from. Now, Dr. Cassidy was explaining that when you cremate bone, unfortunately you destroy all the DNA. So they were looking in all of the remains of human remains that have been found on Irish archaeological sites are stored in a warehouse in Swords in County Dublin. I'm not sure if that's a National Monuments Service facility or whether it's a Department of Heritage facility. I don't know who looks after it. So they were going through the boxes and all they found was loads of cremations from Newgrange. But Dr. Cassidy produced the book on Newgrange, which I should be able to find quicker than that. And she was saying, you know, this is the book that Professor O'Kelly published about the finds at Newgrange. And she pointed in particular to the plates on the human remains. And I have it marked. And she said they were very interested in these bones, which are, some of you who might be more specialists than me now have to find the Petrous temporals. Apparently it's a very, very dense part of the human skull, and they can almost look like polished marble. And it's very hard to destroy. And so it's a very good place to extract DNA from. Hang on till I just see if I can see it here. This is section B. Yes, top left, part of the left Petrous temporal bone. Top right, part of the right Petrous temporal bone. And parts of the frontal bone. So she was very interested in trying to locate these. And in fact, what happened was that when they were going through the boxes, they seemed to have exhausted all possibilities. And they were a bit disappointed because everything seemed to be cremated. But she said there was one last box that was marked cremations. And she said they almost weren't going to look in it. But what happened was that she said, look, we'll have a look anyway. And lo and behold, inside the box are these Petrous temporal bones from Newgrange. And you could see the excitement in Dr. Cassidy. She's like, yes, these are perfect for extracting DNA. And of course, the rest, as they say, is history. Sorry. Or in this case, prehistory. You'll know, I presume, from all of the headlines a couple of months ago, that it was discovered about this skull that, first of all, it was dated. So it was buried in Newgrange around 5,200 years ago, 3,200 BC. The DNA analysis, Dr. Cassidy said, when they sequenced the genome, she thought there was an error in the results because the results indicated that there was, well, it was off the charts was, I think, the phrase that was used, that it would appear that the person to whom the skull fragments belonged was a male who was the product of what they called first-degree incest. In other words, this man, his parents were either brother and sister or parent and offspring, which they thought was absolutely fascinating. Dr. Dan Bradley then commented, and he was brilliant as well. He commented about how this is extremely rare. It is taboo, universally taboo, except for in extreme circumstances. Of course, the one that was focused on was Egypt, where the pharaohs married the pharaohs married their sisters, basically, to continue a sort of a pure bloodline, and that they believed that they were descended from or related to the gods. In fact, it may have been believed by the people that they were the gods themselves. So that much we kind of knew already, but it was lovely to see the bones, the actual bones that had been retrieved from the chamber of Newgrange, and that there was something there that can tell us a story about Shion Bru. Now, what else? So the Petrous temporals were found in a box labelled cremations. They almost didn't look in the box, which is fascinating. So the question being asked, of course, was, could similar attributes or beliefs have prevailed in the Boyne Valley in the Irish Neolithic in 3200 BC? Could it have been that some people who maybe commanded the population, and of course that is indicated in the mythology, we'll get to that in a moment, that they were seen as divine, that they were seen as, related to the gods or descended from the gods or being semi-divine or whatever. And so we were left with a lot of information to process. It seems that there were these three distinct periods. Mesolithic, and as I say, that's an insular Mesolithic. There doesn't seem to have been contact between the people living in Ireland between 10,000 and 600 years ago, and the people of the same era living on mainland Europe. A quite extensive influx of Neolithic people, again genetically different, and then another shock to the system. We knew this already, but look, this is relatively new information, as I say, past 5 or 6 years, that an entirely different people came along, the people of the early Bronze Age, and it is they who we are largely descended from today. A lot of food for thought. It's the first of a 3-part series. I'm looking forward to seeing the other 2, although that was the one that most interested me. DNA Caillte was the title of it, which I believe means lost DNA. A really, really fascinating programme. In the long tradition of TG4, the Irish language television station, they make the most sublime and fascinating documentaries. They always have done, of course, with English subtitles. So, like a lapsed Gaeilgeoir like myself, who unfortunately doesn't speak fluent Irish, can easily keep up with what's being said. And a few of the people they interviewed were only spoke in English anyway, like Dr. Cassidy, for instance. But delighted to see Dr. Anne Lynch is a fluent Gaeilgeoir. She was brilliant. On Rathlin Island, they showed the site where the porcelainite axe heads were quarried, and they were brought down to the beach apparently, and using sand, gonyuv in Irish, using sand, they polished these axe heads. The reason that's important is because Rathlin is this small island off the very north coast of Northern Ireland, and it's off out there in the ocean, and people would think, how could such a small place have any significance to our story? Well, the first one, of course, is the fact that they found a Bronze Age burial there from which they were able to extract some of the DNA information. But the other one was, of course, the axes, because these are found in Neolithic sites all over Ireland and Britain and even in continental Europe, and they travelled from there. And if anything, that demonstrates, if we didn't know it already, it demonstrates that in the Neolithic, the people of the Neolithic, were very well travelled. I haven't been to Rathlin Island. I've been to several of the offshore islands. Probably the closest one to Rathlin I've been to is Tory Island, and I've been to Gowalla Island off Donegal. Never been to Rathlin. I'd love to go there, and especially now in light of all that new information, I'd love to go and see these places. The pub on Rathlin was building a car park in 2006, and they did an archaeological investigation, and that's when they found this Bronze Age burial there. So lots to take in. I had the pleasure of listening to a talk that Dr. Cassidy gave at an event in Slane on the last day of February. This is a couple of weeks before the COVID-19 situation overtook matters in Ireland. And at the talk, she did reveal certain things, and she asked the audience not to carry the information out of the room. And in fairness to us, we kept tight-lipped about it, knowing that what she was saying was very exciting. This programme was obviously made over the past year before COVID-19, no evidence of social distancing or masks, and there was lots of handshakes going on, so I assume it was all made before that. Really delighted to see that the mythology was given some place in this, and that it wasn't completely devoted to just the hard science, which in itself is wonderful and revealing great things. Of course, the big thing I suppose the big emphasis in terms of mythology in the paper in Nature was relating to the Dinchanicus story of Doubt, which says that the king who commanded all of the men of Ireland, doesn't mention the women, just says the men of Ireland, to build him this tower from which he could pass to heaven. Bresal Bodibad was his name. That his sister had cast a spell on the sun so that the sun would stand still in the sky. But that the spell was broken when lust seized the king and he went in unto his sister. That's the language that's used in the translations. He went in unto his sister and they committed incest, and the spell was broken and a sudden darkness came upon the place. The women were busy, says Riley Flynn. Yes, exactly. They were doing more important things, not megalomaniac construction projects. But you hopefully will know, and in fact I will share it right now as I'm talking, you hopefully will know that I carried out a more comprehensive examination of mythology to find out that there isn't just one myth actually pertaining to incest, directly relating to Brunabonia. There are three in total. The first, the aforementioned Douth story from the Dinchanicus, but there are two more pertaining to Sheonvrew or to Newgrange, in which I felt it was very, very important to discuss in all of this. And I'm just going to post that in here if I can, as a comment under this live video, so hopefully you'll see that link and you'll go to it there. So there are actually three myths. And so the fascinating thing, and I don't think that the documentary really, I don't think its remit was to discuss, the veracity of mythology or the deep truths that are contained in mythology. You know my views on it, I hope, at this stage. My views are quite clear that my belief is that our ancient myths, yes, they do, some of them in some cases, carry information all the way from the Neolithic forward. All of the arguments against that from the medieval scholars are manifold, but they still do not negate the fact that the information is there in the first place, and that information encoded in mythology is now being proven by the scientific methods that are being used to investigate these sites. That is one of the reasons Mythical Ireland exists in the first place, because from the moment I began research with Richard Moore in 1999, it was obvious to me, or it seemed obvious to me, and perhaps I was a little bit naive then, but I know an awful lot more now, and I'm resolute in my opinion and my view, and that is that some of the myths certainly do contain information from the earliest times. We could get into a room of specialists and discuss that for hours, days, weeks, months and years, and come out of the room afterwards and not one of us will agree with the other, and that may continue to be the case for a long time into the future. Certainly for me, Dr. Cassidy's work has been very exciting, not just because it's revealing things about the ancient Irish people and of course their connection to the modern population, but more importantly for me, proving that in fact there is veracity in the mythology. So I'm going to hang on for a minute and see if there's any questions. There's tons of comments scrolling up the screen there. Now, it's curious that Craig Surratt is asking there about whether the Delta Egyptians are genetically related to Neolithic European megalith builders. So it's likely that both people would share a great many cultural elements. The fascinating thing was they did say that the Neolithic Irish had their origins in the Fertile Crescent, and they did suggest a link with Egypt. But it has been said by archaeologists that there's nothing in the material record that would connect the Irish mound builders with the pyramid builders. In fact, the pyramids are later than the pyramid builders are later than the Irish, for instance, the Boyne Valley tombs by, is it 1,000 years? I think it's 1,000 years. Somebody's asking, will this be available on YouTube? I didn't stream on YouTube. I just wanted to get going really quickly, and it takes a bit to set up. What I will do is I will save the video from Facebook and upload it to YouTube afterwards for those people who are interested. Bernie Courtney says, when one reduces the study of the past to a science alone, then the reality can't be missed. Myths are important. Couldn't agree more, Bernie. Absolutely, that would be my viewpoint. Kelly Edmiston says, Amergin is popping up to meet you soon. That's another one that I'm dogged about. Watch this space, Kelly. That's all I can say, because I've been writing about Amergin, and I'm really excited about Millmount and Drogheda. Richard says, I have a theory that the pharaohs sent out tribes to populate the world, and we were one of those groups. Well, I don't really know enough about that. I haven't really done the comparative work. Some of the pharaohs were red-haired, I know, and people make a lot of truck about that, and there's mention of pharaohs in the Irish mythology, and people think, oh, well, there's your obvious connection. The difficulty with that is, of course, that, as was mentioned in the documentary, that the monks who wrote the myths down were very, very well travelled across Europe, and they were very familiar with European mythology and history, and of course, their principal aim in writing the myths down, one of their principal aims was to try to give Ireland an origin story, and Laura Gowalla does that, but they concocted genealogies to link the Irish with biblical characters. So, for instance, the Laura Gowalla begins with the dispersal of the nations, and then quickly carries on to say that Noah's granddaughter Kezer came to Ireland, and there's this sort of concerted effort to link early Irish history with biblical history. And Scota is much, much later than this. Caitlin Moon says, yes, absolutely right. Let me see if there's any more questions that need answering. Yeah, I'm just scrolling. There's a lot of just people making just quick comments. Yeah, Megan points out something important. The child from Pulnabrone wasn't incest. That's a different site and a different burial, unrelated to the Newgrange gentleman who was seen to be the product of incest. So the child at Pulnabrone had Down syndrome. The man in Newgrange had first-degree incestuous parents. Also, something that I don't think was mentioned in the programme was the fact that NG10, this sample from Newgrange, he was related to some of the people who were buried at Carrowmore and Carrowkeel in Sligo. So there was clearly a dynastic thing going on. Some people have sort of commented, sorry, I do apologise. I wasn't supposed to do that. Some people have commented that, it's only one sample from Newgrange, so what can we tell from one sample? The truth is that we can actually tell quite a lot, especially if we can match it, not just with samples found in other parts of Ireland, but of course there is a European database of genomes And that is why there's so much comparative work going on, which is showing us so much. It's fascinating stuff. Actually, one thing that I want to do, and I know that a few people have asked, and I know that she's been busy, but I would really love to have Dr. Cassidy on as a guest on Live Irish Myths. Look, her speciality will be the DNA. She's very, very knowledgeable on archaeology, and she knows a bit about mythology too, so I think she would be an interesting guest, and we could perhaps discuss the other myths pertaining to Newgrange which mention incest and see what she thinks about those. Timothy says, when I did my DNA, I had some of the rares DNA, and what they were were Coptic Egypt Jews who went to Spain many moons ago. Fascinating stuff. Look, one thing I've said repeatedly, and I want to say it again, just in case people are following Mythical Ireland because you think that, there are undertones here with everything that's going on in the world at the moment. People might think, that I'm not one of these people who's fanatical about the Irish race. I wouldn't like anyone to ever think that there's a racist motive for this. The fact of the matter is, whether we like to acknowledge it or not, is that no matter how long we've been here, the Irish people have their origins on foreign shores. We're told that the Mesolithic people who came here likely came from Britain. So the first Irish inhabitants after the Ice Age were British, if you want to put it that way. Of course, Ireland and Britain were although the similar land masses to what they are today politically and from a sort of religious and spiritual point of view, were two very, very different places. Our origins ultimately lie beyond the shores of this island. No matter how short a time we've been here or how long a time we've been here. Apparently the idea that there was a land bridge or an ice bridge at the end of the Ice Age connecting Ireland to Britain or the continent has been largely dismissed. So we had to have come across the sea. And of course, when you read the myths, when you read Gowalla, that's precisely what it says. People kept coming in waves. And lo and behold, we find that our history, as is being proved by modern science, sort of reflects that to a degree. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down to the end to see if there are any new comments that are... Did some Celtic people originate in ancient Greece? According to the myths, yes, but you have to be very, very careful with all that stuff, because you just have to be so careful, because people jump on that, and they jump on this idea that Tia, the wife of Erimon, the first Milesian king, that she was said to have been the daughter of a pharaoh, and people seize upon this as some sort of proof that the ancient Irish and the pharaohs were connected. It's not that simple at all. Cy B says we are all Heinz 57. The truth of the matter is, and this is so important with everything, as I say, that's happening in the Western world at the moment, it's so important to emphasize that there's no such thing as a pure genetic race. We are all a hodgepodge. We have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of ancestors. We have generations and generations of ancestry. Who knows? If I traced my ancestry, and I could do so accurately, who knows what I might find? I might find that Anthony Murphy is descended from Neolithic farmers, from Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, from Bronze Age arrivers. I might find that I've got Anglo-Norman blood. I might find that I have Viking ancestry. I might find that I have English ancestry. Who knows? I think it's a fruitless pursuit, to imagine that one can be purely Irish in some way. And in fact, I think the science is proving all this. However, if you if you want to be genetically very unique and shock future scientists, then apparently incest is the way to go. But I shouldn't joke about these things, because there is a serious side to all that as well. Some people still pondering, is there lost Atlantis who turned up for a cup of tea. Yes, I know a lot has been made about Ireland possibly being Atlantis, but I can't possibly comment because I will only feed one side of the argument or the other. Theresa says, I am waiting for the Irish DNA research results on maternal DNA. Question, how common 12B is among Irish females? And I think that's for a geneticist to answer, Theresa, but it's an interesting question all the same. DNA doesn't lie, says Donna Jean Porter. And in fact, as I said, Dr. Cassidy was initially saying, hang on a second, this data has to be wrong. And in fact, the data was right. Okay, so that's my summary of tonight's programme, which was called DNA Caillte on TG4, which is basically a revamped version of what we used to call Telefís na Gaeltacht, which is the Irish language. It is the Irish language station. As I say, they do the most wonderful documentaries. Really, really superb. I'm an American mutt with a hefty dose of Irish, says Virginia. Do you know what? You just don't know. You just don't know. I could go back 5 or 6 generations and find that I'm actually descended from, an English lord on one side and a French dame on the other. I don't know. Who knows? But certainly, if you saw it, you were lucky because it was a wonderful production. If you didn't see it, people have been asking, will it be on YouTube? I don't think TG4 puts its documentaries on YouTube. They did live stream it on their viewer on their website. Unfortunately, I did share the link before the program. Unfortunately, people in the States were saying that it was not viewable where they were. So unfortunately, I don't have an immediate answer for you as to how you might see it, but I hope that I have done you some service in summarising the TV programme. Somebody's asking about can you recommend a DNA test? No, I can't, because I don't know anything about it. I've never it's not my area, and I haven't had any ancestry done or whatever. Maybe other people can suggest something. Kerem Gogus is in the house and says, I'm a firm believer of Atlantis and the lost continent of Mu, especially because some really solid people did deeper research about the Mu. I think the difficulty with Ireland, Kerem, is that we have very, very little, if no evidence, apart from a couple of flint stones that were carved by human hands, apparently 300,000 years ago. We have very little evidence of pre-Ice Age or anti-Ice Age activity. So absence of evidence, of course, is not evidence of absence, but we've great difficulty in going back before Mount Sandel, basically, because we've very, very little material evidence. Charlene says, mine was 99% Scottish, Irish, Welsh and English. Been in the USA since the mid-1700s. There you go. It may be possible. It may be possible that the programme will be repeated in the future, but again, I'm not sure about, if you're not in Ireland, how you might view it, unfortunately. Larissa says, thank you so much, Anthony. Your work is appreciated. Thanks, Larissa. Yvette Tillema says, I am a guaranteed mongrel, hybrid vigour. I would go with that. I mean, I don't want to know my ancestry, actually. Quite happy to. I don't think it's important. I'm here, no matter how I got here, I'm here, and I don't see the racial or genetic division that other people are seeing at the moment between people of varying nationalities and skin colours. We're all one. We all share this small planet. So this one wasn't really live Irish myths. It was just an effort to, as long as people don't say the earth is flat, I'm happy. Don't get them started, Richard. Just for the record, I absolutely believe that science has it right. The earth is definitely round. It's definitely a globe. I believe in Atlantis and spent a past life there, says Charlene. Very interesting. Just realised how late it is Irish time. It's 11:15 p.m. Okay, right, I'm going to head on, folks, but I hope you enjoyed that. And look, if you get to see that programme, it has been wonderful. Don't forget to download the paper. I'll hopefully share the link to that when I'm finished. In the meantime, check out mythicalireland.com and go to the blog, because there are several articles, and we did 2 episodes of Live Irish Myths. If I'm not mistaken, episode number 98 and episode 102 or 103. We did a couple of episodes, and if you hadn't seen them, perhaps go back and see them. The second of those episodes was more detailed because I had read the paper in detail, and I think you'll get a lot from that. Episode 102, Live Irish Myths, episode 102, Newgrange, what does the DNA tell us? Actually, I can provide a link to that now that you can have a look when we're done. So I'd recommend going there, and I think that there's probably a download link to the paper in my blog. In fact, I'm pretty sure there would be at the end of the blog posts, plural, about the paper. Anyway, in the meantime, yes, it is late, and I have to finish my little glass of white wine, and I raise a toast to you all. Thank you very much for dropping in, and we'll see you on, if not before then, we'll see you on Monday evening for the next session, the next episode of Live Irish Myths, which is episode 115, if I'm not mistaken. Good night to you all. Slán go fóill. Gowalla.